Barrie Schwortz walked into Turin in 1978 as a Jewish skeptic who expected to expose the shroud as a medieval forgery. After 46 years, he concluded it could not have been made by human hands. And the moment everything changed was a phone call in 1995, when a blood chemist got irritated with him and said 4 words that ended 17 years of resistance. "Did you not read my paper?" He was 32 years old when this started. He was a photographer, not a theologian. And he had already decided the whole thing was probably a forgery. He had even said it out loud somewhere publicly that he expected to take one look, see the brushstrokes, and fly home. He lived to regret those words for the next 46 years. Because within the first hour of examining that cloth, he knew it was not painted. He knew it because paint was literally his area. He was looking for the things that give a painting away. The directionality, the brushwork, the way pigment sits on fibers, none of it was there. None of it. That moment in that room in Turin did not make him a believer. It made him a man with a problem.
I was a total skeptic and figured that the shroud was probably some form of a painting, which was the conventional wisdom in 1978. I fully expected to get to Turin, take a quick look, see the paint and the brushstrokes, and go home. I even stupidly said that publicly somewhere. And of course, for the last 35 years, I've been living to regret those words.
The team he was part of was called STURP, the Shroud of Turin Research Project. It was the first and only time a full scientific team was ever given permission to do a real in-depth examination of the cloth. 30-plus scientists, chemists, physicists, engineers, medical professionals. They had the shroud for 120 uninterrupted hours, and they ran every test they could run without cutting it up. What they came back with was not a neat answer. It was a list of things the cloth was not. When Schwortz stood in front of audiences over the years, and people expected him to announce the mystery was solved, this is what he kept saying instead. The image is not painted, not a photograph, not a scorch, not a rubbing. We have been unable to determine a mechanism that could create an image with those specific chemical and physical properties. That was not a marketing line. That was the summary of a 46-year investigation that never closed. But here is where the story turns. And it is not where you expect it to turn. For 17 years after Turin, Schwortz still would not say the shroud was authentic. He had seen the evidence. He had lived inside the evidence. And he still held back. There was one thing he could not get past: the blood. Blood on a cloth, even after a few hours, should turn brown, should turn black. The blood on the shroud was reddish. That was his sticking point. And he had been sitting with that sticking point since 1978. Then, in 1995, he got a phone call from a blood chemist named Alan Adler, who had been on the STURP team. And Adler, who was famously direct, basically got irritated with him. He said, "Did you not read my paper?" Because Adler had found extraordinarily high levels of bilirubin in the blood on the cloth. Bilirubin is what your body produces when you are under extreme physiological trauma, severe beatings, torture, the kind of stress that the body almost cannot survive. When bilirubin is present at that level, it keeps blood red even across centuries. Schwortz had his answer. After 18 years of holding the door open just a crack, he walked through it. He had examined the shroud as part of the STURP team at age 32, but did not confront his own faith until he was forced to do so 18 years later, at the age of 50, so he could answer the questions honestly. And then he said something that stopped a lot of people cold.
That I posed kind of at the beginning, what's a Jewish man like me doing involved with the most important relic of Christianity? Why? Well, it took me a long time to figure out the answer. But now it's obvious. God wanted me to do it. Isn't it funny how God always seems to pick a Jew to be the messenger?
How many Jews can say it was the Shroud of Turin that brought them to faith in God? I can. Read that again. A man raised in an Orthodox Jewish home in America, 2 sets of dishes, 2 sets of silverware, parents who had fled Poland just before the war, a man who went into that examination room in 1978 already planning his exit, a man who spent 17 more years resisting what his own data was telling him. That man, at 50 years old, standing alone with everything he had spent his entire professional life studying, looked into his own heart and found God waiting there. One of the things people never understood about Schwortz is that he was not an evangelist. He was almost allergic to the idea of convincing anyone of anything. He founded Shroud.com to put the actual scientific papers out there. He hated what the media did to the Shroud, the way they would get everything slightly wrong, the way complexity got ironed out into a simple story. In 1988, a sample was taken from the Shroud and sent to 3 separate radiocarbon labs. They dated it to somewhere between 1260 and 1390 AD. The world announced the Shroud was a medieval forgery, but here is what happened 17 years later. A chemist named Raymond Rogers, who had been skeptical, decided to prove that theory wrong. He compared several samples. Hours later, he called Schwortz and said they were right. There was cotton in the sample that did not exist anywhere else in the Shroud. The section that had been dated was a medieval repair patch, rewoven into the original cloth. They had dated a patch, not the Shroud. That is the kind of thing that keeps happening with the Shroud. Every time someone closes the case, something reopens it. And right now, in 2026, the case is opening again. In January of this year, Pope Leo XIV, the new pontiff, announced that he wants to travel to Turin to visit the Shroud personally. He has already met with the Cardinal of Turin to discuss the possibility of allowing new scientific testing. The last time any serious testing was permitted was 1978. That is 48 years ago. The technology available today, the imaging tools, the DNA analysis, the spectroscopic techniques, makes what STURP did look primitive by comparison. Schwortz spent the last years of his life saying that new testing would change everything. Not because the result would be different, but because the precision would be. He believed the data was already there, waiting inside the cloth, for instruments sophisticated enough to read it. He died 8 months before the new pope announced he wanted to look. That timing is either completely meaningless, or it is exactly the kind of thing that keeps happening around this particular object. You can decide which one you believe. The Shroud is a test of faith, not a test of science. There comes a point with the Shroud where the science stops and people have to decide for themselves. That was his final position, held consistently from the moment the evidence stopped letting him be a skeptic to the day he died. He did not tell you what to conclude. He told you what he found. He told you it could not be replicated. He told you the blood was real, the image properties were unique, and that nothing anyone had tried in 46 years of serious scientific investigation had been able to explain how it was made. He spent 46 years finding evidence he never asked for, reaching a conclusion he never planned to reach. The question he left open was always the same. What do you do with that? Tell us in the comments.